to skip right now to the next Tov Reish Yud Ches. These are the halachas that all laymen want to learn. They want to know how to be rabbis. And how do you paskin for somebody who wants to eat on Yom Kippur, or who doesn't want to eat and the doctors say that he wants to eat, that he has to eat. This is an outline. I'll just say that this shir, nobody should take anything that's said as halacha l'maisa, because there's always more pratim that have to be known. But I would like to, let's see the halacha in its classical form. Choyle shetzarach lechol, a choyle who has to eat. If yesham a roife boki, afilu hu goy, if you have even a goyish doctor, she'omer shem lo yachil oisoi, efsher sheyachbir alav hachoyli, his disease will get worse. V'yistaken, and he can come to a sakana. Machil oisoi alpiv. If you have a doctor, even a goyish doctor who is malez such a tzad that this could be dangerous for the person, then you give the person to eat. We don't have to say that he's going to die, just that it's going to become into a dangerous situation. That's enough. The choyle says, I'm good, I don't need anything. We listen to the doctor and we don't listen to the choyle himself. And if the choyle says that I need, if the person says I need, even though the doctors say there's no medical reason that he needs, if the person said that he needs, we give him to eat. Now I'm going to start from the last part of the halacha, and I'm going to say over a psak which I saw b'shen Rabbi Yashiv once, and it makes sense. If the doctor says that he needs, that he doesn't need medication, and the person says, I need medication, so Rabbi Yashiv says, we don't listen to him, we listen to the doctor. If the question is about food, so there, a person knows himself better, but in the world of medicine, the average person is far from being able to assess his situation, and there are sometimes situations, so Yashiv has a long piece about this, sometimes situations that we disregard what the choyle himself says, even though the Gemara says that you listen to the choyle. But that's talking about if the choyle says he needs to eat.
Does that include pain meds?
I'm not right now giving a practical share, okay? I'll just say, I don't think so. I don't even know what pain meds are for. In other words, I know that they're to alleviate pain. What will be if the person has pain? So then you have to know what kind of person he is and what kind of pain he has, I'll just tell you, a person who has an emotional issue, an emotional disease, halacha recognizes emotional and intellectual diseases as much pikuach nefesh as physical ones. So your painkillers, they can be one way or they can be the other way. And when you ask me the question and I answer it, there's no reason to assume that I'm answering the question that you asked. So therefore, I'm not going to bother. Okay? But pain is real. That much I'm willing to say. Okay. Now, Roifa Echad Omer Tzarech, V'Roifa Echad Omar Eino Tzarech. So now you have a machlokes of the doctors. And I just want to tell you something. I learned this probably about 25 years ago or 30 years ago on Erev Yom Kippur. I had hepatitis in the summer, in Av. And I knew that's going to come Yom Kippur, I'm going to have trouble deciding if I have to fast or not. And sure enough, it came for Yom Kippur, and I asked a few doctors. Every single doctor that I asked gave me a different worldview, specific view, and it was, I'm willing to hear if the doctor says that you have to eat, then I would eat, but unclearness is really problematic. And I'll just share with you how these things go. This morning, I got a phone call from somebody, and he said, my wife, I'll just tell you the exact case. My wife is 9 weeks pregnant. She has a detached placenta, and the doctor says that if she doesn't eat, her blood will not be able to patch up the placenta, and it could cause it to rip more, and she could have a miscarriage. So the person told me, this is a true story today. These are the daily pick. So I went to a Rav. This Rav that he went to is a large medical expert, and he said the great Israeli word, shtuyot. Okay? I don't know how you say that exactly in English, but he said there's absolutely no reason why your wife shouldn't fast. Okay? Now, it happens to be, I know that Rav, and I even understand what he's saying, and he's probably right, because a 1 day of not eating is not going to generally change the thickness of the blood enough that it's going to be a problem. Now, she doesn't have a health issue. She has a very specific problem, and that problem you could take care of. She'll lay in bed. There are other things to do that it's not going to be a problem. However, in my opinion, midei sofik lo nofik. He's probably right, the rabbi, but it's not 100% like that. There could be situations where gave me another piece of information that made her pregnancy a little bit more complicated than the average. And I told her, she could tell you what I said. I said she should eat shiurim between 10 and 11 o'clock, and that should be it for the whole day. Okay? And I said the shiurim that I'm talking about is only of drinking, nothing to do with eating, and this is very important. Now, I was on the phone today with somebody from America, and they have cancer, and the doctors in the oncology, they are afraid if the cancer spreads, every ounce of fat that the person has is extremely important to keep them alive. In other words, they want their cancer patients to be fattened up because the disease eats away at their fat. So that person called me and said the doctor says you have to eat. Now, generally speaking, when doctors say that you're not allowed to fast, they just mean that you're not allowed to not drink. But generally, for most people, all of us, if we'd go to our doctor would say, it's good for you to fast, but you have to drink. But in halacha, the two go together sometimes and sometimes not. When you're going to give a person shiurim is an iser deraisa. It's just not chorus. So you have to be very careful what you allow and you don't allow the person to do. So I'm just telling you, when I had my hepatitis, I went to speak to a world-famous professor, and I said, what's going on? Why is it that everybody's saying something different? So he looks me in the eye, and he says to me, do you think they actually made a study on people that had hepatitis on fasting on Yom Kippur? Do you think there was ever such a study made? So obviously the answer was there was no such study made. So I said, so how do the doctors come to their conclusions? They have experience and they have read a lot of material. And just like in every other subject, they learn the subject and they come to conclusion. And therefore, you could have doctors who disagree, mikatza l'katza, and it's not because one is more informed than the other. It has to do with what experiences they had and what literature they read, and that's why you have different opinions. And medicine is as much guesswork as any other profession. People think that medicine and science is all facts. That is not a fact. It's guesswork like everything else. And I just say probably the most important quality that a doctor needs is intuition. Okay? And therefore you'll have all of these issues. So here we have this first halacha. If the person says, I need to eat, that's one thing. If they says he needs to be medicated, there the medical profession, according to Rabbi Yashiv, will outweigh the opinion of the chayil himself. Okay, so we have one Rav that says he needs, one says doesn't. You have a suffix, and makom suffix nefashos l'kula. You give him to eat. Hu adim shtaim neged shtaim, afilu k'sasav yosef b'ksiyam mi b'ksasav. You still go after, 2 against 2. It's called a suffix. Now, I'd like to share with you a fascinating psak from Rabbi Yashiv, and this is a very important yesod in psak halacha also. Person asked me a shayla, and I told him it's mutter. Then he asked a colleague of mine a shayla, and I told him it's mutter. And then he asked Rabbi Yashiv the shayla, and Rabbi Yashiv said it's aser. What's the halacha? I'm a qualified rabbi, my colleague is a qualified rabbi, and Rabbi Yashiv is a qualified rabbi. The halacha is that you take me and my colleague, you throw us into the garbage, and you listen to Rabbi Yashiv. Why? So I'm going to share with you a question. I have a very close friend that's a Rav for many, many years, and when he was a bacher, he already was learning halacha, and he asked Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky the following question. I learned a sugya, and it comes out to me that you have to be machmer. The Mishnah Berurah says that you could be mekel. Am I supposed to be machmer like my maskana, or am I supposed to follow what the Mishnah Berurah said? So Rabbi Yaakov looked at him and smiled and said, you do what the Mishnah Berurah said. So he said, why? So Rabbi Yaakov patted him on the shoulder and said, you are not an opinion. Right? You're a yeshiva bacher, you're not an opinion. Not everybody has the right to have an opinion just because you learned the sugya. You have to have a certain amount of indoctrination, experience, in order to be able to answer a question. You are not an opinion. That's what Rabbi Yaakov told him. Today he is an opinion, this fellow. But the point is a very important point. Says Rabbi Yashiv, when you have two people that are low profile, and you have somebody who's a major doctor that says something else, so then the opinion of the two lower doctors are not opinions in the place of the professor. And Rabbi Yashiv gave on this a fascinating mashal. He said, a person has two roads to go down. And you look into the distance as far as you can see, and you see one road is muddy, and the other road is paved the whole way. So what do you say? Go the paved road. Then comes along a person who's a giant, who's 2 feet taller than you. And he says, go the other way. So you say, why are you saying go the other way? He said, it's true as far as you could see, road A is better than road B. But after, where you can't see anymore, there's a bridge that collapsed on the first way. And the second way, the bridge is still there. So the two opinions from beforehand don't exist. Okay, so this one you have to know when you're outclassed, to know when you have a right to have an opinion, when you don't. And this is important. I'll just share with you another rabbinical, medical piece of information. Many times I have halachic medical questions. I have doctors that I call in the United States, world-class doctors, and I discuss with them the information. Many times they will say otherwise than the practicing physician here in Eretz Yisrael. Here, there's another aspect. As good as a textbook doctor is, but the person who actually handles the patient, he has a better feel sometimes than the professor who is by far a better physician than him. So you have to know, in weighing out all things, how much each person weighs in and what the value of their opinion is. This is a very important concept, and that's why you'll have many times Rabbanim disagree, doctors disagree, mikatza lakatza. Okay, I'll just share with you a fascinating story. One of the Gedolei Ador in America, when I was a bacher, was dying of cancer. And the doctors said he should do a certain treatment. So at that time, they sent Rabbi Yisvei, who was here in Eretz Yisrael, they should go to the stipler and ask if he should do that operation. And the stipler said no. So Rabbi Yisvei started to explain to him why it's worthwhile to do the operation. And the stipler said, if you want to kill him, that's fine. But if you asked me, I said, don't do the operation. Okay? They did the operation. He died almost right afterwards. Okay? So I just, so you have to know when you pull a rabbit out of your hat, if you know your hat that you're pulling the rabbit out of. So this is an important idea you have to know. All right. You have a patient and the doctor that say he doesn't need to eat, and another doctor who says he does need to eat. Two doctors against one doctor, you listen to the two doctors. Once you have two that say that he does need to eat, then that's called a suffix and machila. Okay. Now, so then halacha is machila noisai. That's also called a suffix. All of these things are fascinating ideas on how a suffix is evaluated in the world of refuah and halacha. I'll just share with you. I was once at a medical rabbinical conference before Yom Kippur, and the question that was floored was a fascinating question. You have a lady who's in the 9th month, and her baby is breech. That's called akuz for those who speak English. And they're afraid if she's going to fast, she's going to go into labor, and they're going to have to make a C-section. And they let her eat, she's not going to go into labor, and the baby could straighten itself out, and you could have a regular delivery. Should you let the lady eat or not? Okay? These are, regular medical halachic questions. And the different rabbanim that were on the board, each one answered their answer. I'm not going to get involved in what they had to say, who I agreed with, who I disagreed with. After the whole thing was over, Dr. Rothschild, who was the main doctor in Mani Yeshua, he was Rav Wosner's right-hand man. I got him, and I asked him, what would Rav Wosner say in this question? He said, Rav Wosner would say, you don't do anything until you have a shiloh. In other words, until she starts going into labor, this is not an Erev Yom Kippur question, this is a Yom Kippur question. So you have to even know, when you have a question, when the question becomes a real question. And I would say in the last 72 hours, I had many times people call me up, and what do I do if what you're saying doesn't happen? I said, then you have to ask a rabbi, b'shas ma'aseh. Say, what am I supposed to ask him? I said, you'll have to tell him all the information that you have, because the options are great, and depending on the information, we'll answer the question. I'll just share with you another fantastic story. I was in a shul, and there was a world-famous Rav who was the Rav of the shul, and it was a hot day on Yom Kippur, and somebody fainted. So all the Hatzolah guys came and they revived the guy, and then they went over to the Rav and asked the Rav, should we give him to drink? And I was sure the Rav was going to say to give him to drink. I said, absolutely not. He fainted because it's hot. Ask him. They asked him, and that's what he said. Now I'm going to share with you a medical fact. A person faints because they have an overload on their system. A person can faint because of an emotional overload, a physical overload, or even intellectual overload. A person cannot handle what's being thrown at him, so the body just turns off. And that's how the body protects itself from these kind of situations. So anything that happens which is acutely above the body's capacity, the body will shut down. Now this fellow, they took him outside and they had him sit, it was cool for about 10 minutes. He came in, he was absolutely beseder, he fasted the rest of the fast 100%. How the Rav knew what was the situation with this particular fellow, I don't know. But I do know, and this I did check out, the facts that the Rav said are true. That you could faint just from being hot, and it has nothing to do with the fast. And if you give him to drink, you're not going to make him any cooler. Maybe if you pour water on him, maybe that would be an idea. But so you have to know, and this is very important, when you tell people that they should eat, they could eat, you have to know that you are even addressing their problem. It's like you have a problem, so you tighten the screws. Your problem is with the screws. You have to know where the problem is to know how to deal with it. And that's why you have to have people who are very familiar to answer these questions. And then you need special training for this kind of a subject.
With pouring water, like in the case we just said, Is it more lenient than drinking water?
I'm going to answer your question. I would say yes, but I don't think it's permissible either. Why? I find it hard to believe, and this is, there's what to argue about in this situation, that the guy is not going to enjoy the splash of cold water on his face, right? So there's an aspect of rachitza shel tainug, even though that it's being done for a medical reason also. This is just like washing negelwasser. When you have two reasons together, the poskim shy away from allowing the person to do it. Now, as far as washing oneself, whether it's as chomer as eating, it's not as chomer. So a person will have this situation. I'm going to ask you, if you would come to me on Yom Kippur with this question, I would say, why don't you wait to see what happens? What's the rush? Now, I will say, and this happened here in the shul, it has happened that during the Eilah, I took a walk around, I saw somebody, and I said, you go out and drink. No, that's all. Rav Moshe Feinstein used to do it all the time. Every Yom Kippur during Eilah, he would walk around, and he would kick people out of Beis Medrash and go and say, take a drink.
After Shkia?
Rav Moshe did it after Shkia, but I did it before Shkia. Why? Because there was one guy I told him to drink, and I said, drink on a little bit. It took him till after Nila for him to be able to even say a word. He was just on a chair outside. He was, I just saw it by his color. I said, this guy, we're losing him. And, you have to, these are real situations. Dehydration is a real sakonis nefashos. And you have to be able to have some kind of a way to know, there are ways to know, whether a person is dehydrating or not. It's not such an easy thing for a person who has no experience to be able to make that decision.
I was going earlier and telling people just to stay home.
Okay, I will just say, the year that I had hepatitis and I spoke to the doctors, so what did I do? I'll tell you what I did. I went to yeshiva that has a dormitory above the Beis Medrash, and I slept kamat the whole day. I just got up for Shmona Esrei and for the Viduyim. The rest, I wasn't there for the rest of the davening. And what? I'm here. Let's just put it. At least I'm here. But when you say that it worked, one thing that it did for sure, because of that, it's much easier. I feel very much at home to tell somebody to stay home on Yom Kippur. I did it, so I feel that it's, if that's the situation, it's more important to fast than to go to shul. Let's start off with that thing. And every year I get ladies who want to come to Kol Nidre and Nila, and they want to eat shiurim, right? So whether that should be done or not, you have to know exactly why they have to eat. But probably if they stayed in bed for the whole 26 hours, the whole thing wouldn't be necessary. So you have to know every case exactly what the situation is. All right.
Why don't we see, if a rabbi has expertise in this area, why don't we see a rav has a heter to have his phone open near him on Yom Kippur in case he gets an emergency shireless like that? I've never seen such a thing.
Okay, I will say there actually are people who do.
This week we sleep in a hotline and not in a shoe.
Yeah, but yeah. All right.
The circumstance comes up that when someone's wife is going to have a hard time fasting, being with the kids, and the husband can stay home from shul and watch the kids and watch them sleep.
Okay. I'm going to answer the question. If your children are your responsibility, and if they need you to be at home, so then you have to be at home, and your wife has to fast. So if it means, if you had to go to the hospital to tend to a sick person, you do it. So your wife is at least like the person in the hospital. If she needs you to be at home, then that's your avodas Hashem, to be at home. And this is a very important idea. Many people find it difficult to believe that they actually have such an obligation. And in my opinion, it's a double pasha that they do. Okay. Okay. Here, where is the piece I'm looking for? Okay. There's a fascinating Chuvas Chassam Sofer that I wanted to read. I don't know why you can't find it over here. Here. This is during cholera, when cholera was going on. This Chuvah was written. That year, there was a very famous year, and many things were done in Klal Yisrael. Different Rabbanim went into, it's something like Corona, that everybody went berserk doing all kinds of things. Some of them in history, we look at them as odd, but if you weren't there, it's hard to know how to judge. Okay. I'm reading from a piece of this tshuva. First, I'm reading the first thing. A lady, she could fast, but she's afraid if she fasts, she's not going to have enough milk for her baby. What's the halacha? Is she allowed to eat so that she's able to produce milk for her baby? So let's see. B'tshuvas Dvar Shmuel, Hitter b'pshitas leisha bria menekes ach benohu mesuken l'cholav imoy. He needs to have his mother's milk. V'im tit'ana v'techla, she's going to fast and she'll get weak. Lo yela lahanik v'yistaken hayeled. Hitter lo shaloi les anis. Av al pi shi atzma bria kedei lahatzil misafir pikuach nefesh es havlad. Now, I would like to share with you an application of this question in modern times. What I'm about to say right now, this is like not a halacha l'maisa shir, but all these things that are saying are true halacha l'maisa also. You just have to know where they put them in. There's a Chazon Ish in Sefer. I'll just maybe read it over here, just to give you an idea. Chazon Ish is speaking about a baby who needs mother's milk. Can she pump on Shabbos in order to give the baby milk? All right?
Yeah.
I'm not right now discussing that. I'm discussing, it doesn't make a difference if you do a hand or electric, you're doing a malacha d'oraisa. Okay? And here. End of the siman. Fascinating piece. Okay. Shulchan Aruch, it says you're allowed to have a goy make food for a child. Speaking about that, he's a little bit hungry at a certain degree, but you're allowed to have a guy do it for him. Okay. The kids are very unsettled. That the child is not going to have the proper food. He's going to get a stomach ache. Either he'll become either shilshalim or he will have constipation, or yigrom keiv me'ayim, or it'll cause him to have a stomach ache, or chom kol shehu, hu bichlal safek sakana. This is called a safek sakana. Shekol kilkol efsham sheyigrom choli. Any kilkol could throw the kid out of whack and cause a choli. We call choli safek sakana. Ve'efshar de kavanas hashulchan aruch. We're speaking about this, something else to eat. You should give him what he normally eats. You're afraid if he's not going to have the right food, he's going to get a stomach ache. Yesh lachashul asafik sakana, umisha mekil bedavar, and he does a malacha d'oraisa to give the kid food. Ein maznichin oisai. I translate the word ein maznichin oisai. You don't.
Disdain.
Yeah, but that's there must be some. Okay, but you don't. You don't say that he did something wrong. Umisha botech b'Hashem, and a person who holds restraint and he's botech HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'koveyas mezonos benoi ba'ofen she'em mevashel b'shilo b'Shabbos, without doing a malacha, ein maznichin oisai. So the person who does the malacha is ein maznichin oisai, and the person who doesn't do the malacha is ein maznichin oisai. Okay? Now, this was written 70 years ago. There are many poskim today that say that the materna of today is better than it was, and therefore you're not allowed to do anything. And there are those that say nothing has changed. The children that are used to mother's milk only, if you're going to change it, it's going to have an effect. And this is, I'm not right now, I'm not discussing the bottom line, but this is the question of how much betochen a person has will allow you either to be Mechal Shabbos or forbid you from being Mechal Shabbos. So the person has to know. The same thing applies on Yom Kippur. How do I know this applies on Yom Kippur? Because the Gemara says there was this lady who was very hungry on Yom Kippur. So the Gemara said, tell her that it's Yom Kippur. And one who they told Yom Kippur she refrained, she had a son who was a tzaddik, and the other one who she ate, she had a son who was a Rosha. So this idea of your level of religiosity will affect the halacha of what you're allowed to do or not is a real halacha. It's not like, some kind of a nebulous hashkafa kind of an idea. This is very, very real. So now, he continues on and he says if you have to give the mother to eat in order to have the ben to have food, that's okay, because the suffix pikuach nefesh on the child is pikuach nefesh allows you to do it. You have to give the mother the food. And that's 100% okay. If you lashon hashela, haroifim his hero, nalotzes bipesach beisa b'tainis. The doctor said those who had chalaria cannot leave their house. Mashma kishem segurim bebeisam ena tainis mazik lahem. It sounds like that when they're at home and they're not going to be contaminating other people, that's okay. Imken yisanu v'yisegurim yispalu b'yechidas. Stay home and daven b'yechidas. V'lo yikru b'Torah. Just in order to lane, that's like pretty ridiculous. If there's a tzad that fasting for these people is a problem, how much intake of food does he need in order to avoid a sakana? He should have coffee or tea or soup, and he should have it pachas mikashir, and he should wait the proper amount of time between. And yishte rak lahanoas meyov, v'loy lahanoas groinoi. And you should make sure that the food is not tasty, because the isser, and this is how I'm not going to get to it. The Achiezer has a long piece on this, that the Isser of Achila on Yom Kippur has to be that the food is tasty to you. Hanos Meyav is not enough. In other words, if a person would take, like a syringe and...
IV?
No.
No.
An IV is not food. IV skips the whole digestive system. Right? All it does is puts the nutrients into the blood. But if a person would be fed with a zonda tube, that is, even though he didn't have any hano, if he didn't have any hano, it's good. According to many people, that's not an isser deraisa. So if a person has to drink or eat, they should have their tea or coffee without milk and sugar. Why? Because you shouldn't be enjoying it. Once you can have enjoyment, then it becomes a worse isser. Okay? And if they could have it shaloka derech achila, that would be even better, because that's an Isser Deraisa. Because eating it this way, that's just an Isser of Pachos Mikashir, that's Isser Deraisa. And eating Shaloka Derech Achila, that would be an Isser Derabanan. And I'm just going to share with you, that is not the practice of Rabbanim. The practice of Rabbanim is that they tell people to have shiurim, and they don't say to eat Shaloka Derech Achila. Why do the Rabbanim say that? Because if you tell a person to eat shalai kedei achila, they won't do it. They rather starve than eat something that's putrid. Okay? And the Rav has to make sure the person eats. So he has no choice but to be more makel than what he should. But a person himself, if he knows that he can do it, then that's what he should do. He should have something shalai kedei achila, and that way it would only be an Issa D'Rabbanan. Okay, we'll stop over here.
What are the shiurim again?
Under 40 cc's of liquid and 27 grams of a solid. But there's, generally speaking, there should be no reason that you have to eat. You just have to,
The check is okay to use for kapolas.